Alright there guys, and welcome back to another video. And today, it's time for us to do all of our nutshell videos for the spring anime season. Starting off with Aharen is Indecipherable. And quick side note straight off the bat, the next 4 videos I post after this one will be going up bi-weekly. So basically once every 2 weeks. So the next video I post will be 2 weeks from now, and then the next 3 videos 2 weeks each. After that. Okay, let's get into it. So, Aharen is Indecipherable is about this very short girl called Reina Aharen, who I'm going to be referring to as Aharen-san for the rest of the video, because that's what she's called by most people in the show. So she's this very small girl who's just starting her first year of high school, and she happens to be seated next to our other protagonist, Raidou. And when he starts high school, he doesn't want to be alone, so he wants to make a friend, and he just so happens to sit next to Aharen-san, so that's who he picks to try and become friends with. So he spends the entire day trying to have a conversation with Aharen-san, but to no avail. It never works out for him. And he's wondering, why does she keep ignoring him? Is he doing something wrong? So he spends the whole day trying to figure out why Aharen-san will not talk to him. Then at the end of the day, he finally realizes why he's not having a conversation with her. He notices her lips are moving, but he can't hear her, meaning every time he said something to her, she has responded to him, but he hasn't heard it. So to begin with, the only way Aharen and Raidou actually can talk to each other is Aharen-san literally has to put her face directly next to Raidou's just so he can hear her. And that's how these two first begin communicating, which has them hanging out more at school and becoming friends. And then they even start walking home together from school. So Aharen-san starts giving her lunch to Raidou that she's made, to see what he thinks of it. And he, of course, likes her lunch that she's made for him, because of course he would. That was always going to happen. But as time passes by, Raidou thinks that he and Aharen-san are being followed by someone, as he feels this very strange feeling that there's always somebody tailing the two of them. And he was right to be suspicious, because somebody was following them. Aharen-san's middle school friend, Oshiro. She is this very big girl. Like, she's bigger than Raidou. She looks pretty strong, but she's actually really, really shy, and is constantly hiding from Raidou and Aharen every time she's trying to see what they're up to. She eventually gets spotted by Aharen-san, because Aharen knows her from middle school. She knows her tactics. The reason why Oshiro was even hiding from them is because she wanted to see what kind of a guy Raidou was. Because if she didn't like what she saw, she thought that she'd have to intervene to keep Aharen-san away from Raidou. But she comes around and sees that Raidou isn't actually a bad person. Now, there's a couple of running gags that this show has that are quite funny. The first one being Raidou always misunderstanding something that Aharen is doing or about to do. Like what? For example, one day she came into school with one of her eyes closed and some bruises on her face. So Raidou thought that maybe she'd been in a fight on her way to school, when in reality she walked into a lamppost because she needed eye drops. Then she tries to put them in herself and it doesn't go well. She almost empties the bottle of the eye drops on her face, so instead Raidou does it for her. Then later on, Raidou needs eye drops in his eye and Aharen returns the favour. Another example is when Raidou came into school one day, really fat for some strange reason. And he thought that Aharen-san was the one who was trying to lose weight because she was bringing in healthier food. He thought she was doing it for herself to lose weight, when in reality she was doing it for him to lose weight. And Aharen has an incredible metabolism because one day she came into school looking really fat, just like Raidou, and in the same episode she went back to normal, as if she never ate that much in the first place. Another running gag that I thought was really funny is basically at the arcade with the crane game. Aharen happens to be quite good at it, so she wins things for herself, but she also gives some of them to Raidou. And he also occasionally is quite good at the crane game. So whenever she wins something, she gives it to him, and he basically puts the things that they win from the crane game around his pillow on his bed. And this happens twice. And funnily enough, later on in the show, Aharen then makes a life-size doll of herself for an art project, and that also becomes part of the running gag that the doll stands over Raidou's bed, staring at him all night long. And probably the next running gag that's quite funny involves Momo-chan, who is one of the teachers of Raidou and Aharen. She teaches one of the subjects. And basically, every time she sees Raidou and Aharen together, she thinks they're flirting. And for some reason, it gives her a nosebleed. Or her mouth bleeds, one of those two is always happening, which then makes her faint. This is probably the running gag that was used the most out of any of them. And it got to the point where she fainted so much that one of the other teachers literally had to go to her house to take care of her, as she was even fantasizing in her dreams when she was asleep about Raidou and Aharen getting into romantic situations together, which then made her nose bleed, and her mouth bleed, and her pillow and the top of her bed was covered in blood. How she didn't die from all this blood loss is beyond me. So, as we progress through the show, we have one more running gag. This one's more impressive than it is funny. Basically, anything Raidou and Aharen do together that involves a competition, Aharen always wins. It does not matter what it is, whether it's basketball, an arcade shooting game, or shogi. it doesn't matter what it is, Aharen always wins. And you know what? There's even one more funny running gag that I want to mention. And it's Aharen's dog, Nui. Basically, when Aharen forgets something that she was meant to bring, her dog, Nui, always comes to the rescue with whatever she needs. If she forgets her lunch, at lunchtime, her dog, Nui, will appear with her lunch. She even did this once when two younger characters called Akun and Futaba, who basically sees Aharen as her rival for some reason, and is always ready to call the police on Raidou for whatever reason. Which is also quite funny. But as the show progresses, we meet two new characters that become more involved with Aharen and Raidou, just like Oshiro did, called Sato-san and Ishikawa. These two make a suggestion for all of them to go on a camping trip together. Mainly because Ishikawa and Sato want to see some romantic tension between Raidou and Aharen-san. So at the camping trip, Oshiro is fishing with a spear that she's considering shoving through Raidou's back just for existing, as that's, funnily enough, that's actually another running gag. Oshiro always thinking of wanting to kill Raidou just for being around Aharen-san. Then, at the camping trip, it's nighttime and everyone else is asleep. But Aharen wakes up because she can't sleep as she's quite hungry. And wouldn't you know it, Raidou just so happens to already be awake, cooking up some noodles to eat. So the two of them eat some noodles together. Raidou puts his jacket over Aharen because she's cold. And they do this thing where they say something to each other, but the show has it so the wind is loud enough to where you can't hear what they're saying, which already tells you that they're going to tell you what they said anyway, but just in a future episode, because that's what happened. But it was a really wholesome moment because before they showed us despite they hadn't told us what the two of them had said to each other, Raidou and Aharen share a very wholesome kiss together. And it's only until 2 episodes later, in the final episode of the show, where they show us what the two of them said to each other. Basically, Aharen told Oshiro that she was going to confess to Raidou, but she didn't manage to do it. And neither did he, really. But the two of them still shared that very wholesome kiss. The final episode is all about their confession to each other. So Oshiro challenges Raidou to a game of Reversi, which I don't really know how this game works, but to the best of my knowledge, there's all these circular pieces, and all of them have a white side and a black side, and my guess is that you have to try and beat your opponent by making whatever colour you've picked. So if you've picked white, you need to try and make it so all of the pieces on the board are flipped over to where the white side is on top. That's how you win. And while the two of them are playing, Oshiro reminisces about when she first met Aharen-san in middle school. and how Aharen was really nice to her. Which is funny because in the flashback, Aharen barely even looks taller. She barely looks any smaller in the flashback than what she actually looks like in the regular show. But just before we go any further, probably should mention Aharen's two siblings. Aharen has two younger siblings, Ren, who is her younger brother, and basically he likes to wear Aharen-san's clothes. He basically likes cross-dressing a lot. And then she has a younger sister who's a little bit older than Ren called Eru, who at the beginning she doesn't take too kindly to Raidou, but then warms up to him as she gets to know him a bit more. Now back to the final episode. Raidou finally confesses his true feelings for Aharen-san, just as she happens to turn up at the reversi match. And she also confesses her feelings to Raidou that she likes him. And the teacher, Momo-chan, just so happened to turn up at the same time in the background and faint again. Needed to get one more in there. Then the show ends with Aharen and Raidou holding hands, looking at these very pretty plants that Aharen was watering earlier in the episode, called lupin plants. And that is Aharen is Indecipherable, a very wholesome show, and let's finish it off with telling you that Aharen-san is voiced by Inori Minase, aka Itsuki from the Quintuplets, and Momo-chan, the teacher, is voiced by Kana Hanazawa, Ichika from the Quintuplets. I didn't even know that until today, the day I'm recording this. But yeah, that is Aharen is Indecipherable. I hope you guys have enjoyed. If you have, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and remember, the next 4 videos I post will be going up once every 2 weeks. So I can make sure I've got enough time to record all of them. But until next time, catch you later.